The big game is upon us once again, and no, folks, I'm not talking about the Grey Cup. I'm talking about Super Bowl 56 between the hometown Los Angeles Rams, even though Vegas is treating them like a visitor for some reason, and the upstart Cincinnati Bengals. And as everyone predicted at the beginning of the season, the Super Bowl would be between a quarterback who's basically a rookie and the guy that used to play in Detroit. What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees, and welcome to Super Bowl 56, the Super Bowl 56 episode of my weekly NFL football pick show for the 2021 NFL regular season and postseason, which will come to a close this coming Sunday. We are a short 6 days away from Super Bowl 56. The meeting once again, Joe Burrow and Matt Stafford, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Los Angeles Rams, emanating from SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, a home game for the LA Rams, essentially. Although, again, these big events, kind of like the Stanley Cup Finals and things like that, they're very corporate events. Obviously, every company under the sun that can possibly afford to has Super Bowl tickets internally to give away. So it is a very corporate event, but I would expect SoFi Stadium to be filled with hometown Rams fans, and I think those Bengals faithful are going to travel as well as they possibly can to get into Los Angeles to take a look at this game. Now, the conference championship round, I rebounded big time from the divisional round. Obviously, I struggled mightily in the divisional round, which we talked about on the previous episode. Conference championship round, AFC championship game, NFC championship game. Your boy went 5-1 overall. Very, very strong performance. I correctly predicted this Super Bowl, Bengals Rams, so 2-0 straight up. Went 2-0 against the spread, taking both of the underdogs, Bengals +7, and remember, I took the Niners plus the 3.5 points, and actually had the perfectly predicted final score of that game, Rams 20, Niners 17. So little pat on Justin's back for doing that one. Definitely hitting the groove here towards the end of this season. Now the totals only went 1-1. I took the over in the Bengals game because, my God, it's the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. The over did not hit. They got to, 48 points or something like that. And the number I think was 54. So 2-0 straight up, 2-0 against the spread, even money on the totals in the conference championship round. It means I'm 7-5 across the board for everything in these playoffs. 7-5 straight up, 7-5 against the spread, and 7-5 on the totals, which means I am guaranteed to finish above 500 across the board in these playoffs. I'm going to consider that an accomplishment, given that I was under 500 against the spread this year and well under 500 this year on the totals. And ladies and gentlemen, we are essentially fait accompli in the pick'em pools, the Bridgewater's Finest pool, the Half Moons Against the Spread pool, and the Ante & Co. pick'em pool. We have champions in all three of those pools. The current number ones cannot be caught. So in the Bridgewater's Finest pool, congratulations to Fourth and Ridiculous, who is our overall champion for this season. They lead by 23 points. There's only 16 confidence points left on the board, so Fourth and Ridiculous is our overall winner. Congratulations to them. In the Half Moons pool, Moby Polito, they have clinched the overall championship as well. They are up by 18 points with only 16 points remaining. So Moby Polito is the overall champion in the Half Moons pool and is going to get a nice cut of Half Moon's money. So congratulations to them. And Rams fan 412 in the Ante & Co. straight up pick'em pool. They are the overall leader. They are +2 in that league with only the one game remaining, so nobody can catch them. Rams fan 412 has clinched the overall championship in Ante & Co. and congratulations to them as well. A little bit of movement from yours truly last week. I went from 19th to 18th in the Bridgewater's Finest pool, from 29th to 28th in the Half Moons pool, and I stayed pat at 13th in the Ante & Co. from last week. 1,476 confidence points in the Bridgewater's Finest pool, good for 63.3%. 1,133 confidence points in the Half Moons pool, good for 48.6%. I'm at 161 total straight up wins on the season in the Ante & Co pool, good for 56.7. And obviously, I ran the table last week, 24 of 24 possible confidence points in both the Bridgewater's Finest and Half Moons pools. I was in fact the only person in the Bridgewater's Finest pool who actually placed 16 confidence points on the Bengals to win that game. Not that I was necessarily more confident in the Bengals to beat Cincinnati than I was in the Rams to beat the Niners, but if I was going to play catch up, that was the only way to do it, was to go 16 on the Bengals, because I knew virtually nobody else would, and wouldn't you know who won the pony, I was the only one to do it. Now, in both the Bridgewater's Finest and Half Moon's picks pools, we had obviously multiple teams tie. Multiple teams went undefeated last week at 2-0. So we had 4 teams tied, including myself, in the Bridgewater's Finest pool, going 2-0, bringing in all 24 confidence points that were available. And in the Half Moons pool, we had 9 teams tie, getting both of the games correct against the spread last week, bringing in all 24 possible points. Now, I will point out, in the Ante & Co pool, I was in fact the only person in that pool that correctly predicted both games. So I went 2-0, and I had the weekly win all to myself in the Ante & Co pool. So once again, pat on the back for old Justin for having an excellent conference championship round. Now, before we get into discussing Super Bowl 56, I'll let you know, as I always do, that if you go to the description of the video here on YouTube or the audio file on SoundCloud, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts of choice, you can find all of my results from last week, my straight up against the spread and over-under play for Super Bowl 56. You can find information on joining any of those pools if you'd like to get in on the fun for Super Bowl 56. You can find information on joining the NFL YouTube Prognosticators Facebook page, and you can find information on my great friends and sponsors at NerdTees. NerdTees.ca is where you need to go, folks, and who doesn't love a good sale? Right now, NerdTees.ca, 15% off site-wide on NerdTees.ca. That's right, NerdTees is all about love, ladies and gentlemen, and with Valentine's Day right around the corner, a site-wide sale is on deck at nerdtees.ca. Use the promo code LOVE2022. So LOVE2022, that is going to get you 15% off site-wide on nerdtees.ca. Look, normally I'd be plugging my own promo code, which is BW Finest, which is also going to save you the 15%. But look, whenever they're doing a big sale, I love to give them as much support as I possibly can. So look, site-wide sale, use either one of those codes, LOVE2022 or BW Finest. You are going to save 15% at checkout on everything on nerdtees.ca. You're also going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100 as per usual. And if you're one of my listeners in the United States, a great conversion rate on the US dollar. Now, today's blend, we are trying something new. This is one of the nice little sampler packs that my friends at NerdTees decided to provide me with this time around. This is Canadian Breakfast. Now, this is a black tea, which normally I consider a little too strong for my palate. Like, I've had some black teas that, like, put more hair on my chest than is already there. Like, there are some strong black teas on this website. So as soon as I saw that this is a black tea, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. But you season that thing a little bit, you all dress that thing with a little bit of milk and a little bit of a sweetener, and this is actually a really solid cup of tea. A little more caffeine, a little bit stronger, but not overwhelming in the least, and just makes you feel good like a good Canadian breakfast should. But whether it's Canadian Breakfast or one of the other dozens and dozens of incredible tea blends that you can find on nerdtees.ca, you cannot go wrong. So either one of those promo codes, LOVE2022 for the current site-wide sale, or BW Finest, is going to save you your 15%. You're going to get your free shipping if you spend over $100. You're going to find yourself something to love, or you can find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtees.ca. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it is time. Super Bowl 56, the Cincinnati Bengals in Los Angeles, taking on the Los Angeles Rams. The Bengals technically considered the home team in this game, but let's be real. This is a home game for the Los Angeles Rams, and I will certainly be treating it as such. The Rams enter this game 4.5-point favorites against the spread, with a total from Vegas coming at 48.5 points. Bengals now 13-7 on the regular season, 7-3 on the road. And once again, I am treating this as a road game, whether Vegas is or not. 7-3 away from their home building this year were the Cincinnati Bengals. The Rams extending their record to 15-5 with their win in the NFC Championship game. They are 7-3 in games played at SoFi Stadium. The Rams have been betting favorites all but 3 times this year, and in those games, they are 12-5 straight up, beating opponents on average by a little over 5.5 points per game. Worth pointing out, all 5 of their losses this season came as the betting favorite. Cincinnati is an underdog, a very solid, very respectable 7-4 straight up as betting underdogs this year. So Cincinnati as underdogs really paid off on the money line this year. They won those games on average, beating opponents by a little more than 3.5 points per game. Now, against the spread, completely different story. The Rams might have been 12-5 straight up, but only covered Vegas's line 7 times in 17 games against the spread this season. 7-10 as betting favorites, and lost to Vegas's line on average by about a point a game. Meanwhile, Cincinnati is a dog. Look, you win 7 games straight up as an underdog, you're going to have an incredible against the spread record. And they did 8-3 against the spread as underdogs, as betting underdogs this season for the Bengals. And they beat Vegas's line by over a touchdown per game, plus 7.5 on average to the line. Now, let's break this down even further. Let's put this game situationally. The Rams at home, the Bengals away from home. As a home favorite this year, the Rams were 6-3 straight up and beat opponents on average by a full touchdown per game. A really solid performance in their own building as favorites. Cincinnati as underdogs on the road, very respectable, 5-2 as dogs on the road this year, beating opponents on average by plus 5.9, so almost 6 full points per game. But once again, against the spread, completely different story. Rams 6-3 straight up as home favorites, only 4-5 against the spread as home favorites this year, and we're losing to Vegas's line by about 0.5 point per game. Meanwhile, in Cincinnati's 7 games as road underdogs this year, 6-1 against the spread, beating Vegas's line by double digits on average, plus 10.4. The Bengals lived and thrived as underdogs away from their own building. Now, of course, up to this point in the playoffs, we've been talking about records against conference opponents or even division opponents in these divisional games. Obviously, for this game, we've got to go out of conference for these teams' 5 games against opponents from the other conference. Cincinnati against the NFC, kind of mediocre this year, but their wins were blowouts. They only won 2 of those 5 games that they played against NFC opponents this year, but they did beat those teams on average by almost 3.5 points per game. So the losses were relatively close. The wins were very, very big on average. Meanwhile, the Rams had a very strong season against the AFC, winning 4 of those 5 head-to-head matchups and winning those games on average by over a touchdown, plus 7.6 for a margin of victory. Now, overall, against the spread on the season, probably going to be no surprise to anybody. The Bengals have a very significant edge here. 13-7 against the spread and straight up this season for the Bengals. On average, Cincinnati beat Vegas's line by over 4.5 points per game, which, wouldn't you know who won the pony, is the exact spread in this game. Meanwhile, the Rams, even money against the spread this year, 10-10 ATS, and on average did beat Vegas's line by about a half point. I didn't do this for any other game, but I thought it was worthwhile to take a peek at how these two teams did on the totals against the total points. These were two kind of middling teams overall this season to the over. Only 18, 21, and 1 to the over this year. So they hit 18 of them, but they pushed on one and had 21 unders. On average, they did beat Vegas's total to the over by about a half point. However, there is a story to tell here situationally, that being the Rams at home, the Bengals away from home. In 20 games combined this year, only hitting 6 of 20 overs. 6 and 14 in those games, losing to the over by an average of more than 3 points per game. That is a very strong lean under that point total of 48.5. Some storylines to look at coming into this game. The Bengals and the Rams come in combining having 15 players right now who are either listed as questionable or worse heading into Super Bowl 56. So it'll be really interesting to pay attention, especially on the Rams side, I think, to who is actually in this starting lineup. Andrew Whitworth is questionable. Tyler Higbee at tight end, I believe, is doubtful in this game. Jalen Ramsey is questionable coming in. Taylor Rapp has a concussion. He's questionable coming into this game. And for Cincinnati, CJ Uzomah, and I'm going to make a big deal out of CJ Uzomah. Look, his stat line might not jump off, but when he left that game against the Chiefs, you could see measurably on screen how that Bengals offense changed. They didn't have that short yardage weapon that Joe Burrow likes to go to, a miniature version of Mark Andrews. Obviously, I'm not going to say CJ Uzomah is as talented as Mark Andrews, but what I am going to say is Burrow uses him a lot the same as Lamar Jackson uses Mark Andrews. So when Uzomah was not in there, that offense changed. If Uzomah's not ready to go, that's going to be a big question mark for this Bengals offense, especially in short yardage. Obviously, so much of the focus is on the quarterback matchup here, Joe Burrow versus Matt Stafford, but I'm taking a look in that backfield, Cam Akers versus Joe Mixon, and I genuinely think that might be the deciding factor of this football game. Both of these teams were top 6 run defenses in the regular season. It's been a different story in the playoffs, but they were both top 6 run defenses in the regular season. They were also both bottom 10 run offenses in the regular season. So whoever wins between Cam Akers and Joe Mixon, who are both top 3 in playoff rushing yards, and we're going to elaborate on this a little bit as we go, whoever wins between those two backs, that may be the deciding factor in this football game, who is better able to move the ball on the ground. In much the same vein, I believe this game will be won both at and behind the line of scrimmage. Obviously, the battles between these two offensive lines and defensive lines going to be interesting to pay attention to, and Cincinnati has combined to have 8.0 sacks in these playoffs on their defensive line, of course, led by Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson. The Rams have combined to have 5.0 sacks, obviously led by Von Miller and Aaron Donald. So the game's going to be won or lost at the line of scrimmage and in the backfield. So before I give you my actual prediction, I thought we would do a little exercise here, which is called Who's Got the Edge? And I'm going to look at various position groups and just try to figure out who I think, anyway, has the edge in the micro before I decide who's going to win this thing in the macro. So we're going to start right at the most important position, at the quarterback position. I'm going to give a slim edge here to the Los Angeles Rams. Look, Matt Stafford and Joe Burrow are number 2 and number 3 in these playoffs in terms of passing yards, behind only Patrick Mahomes. They've both played 3 games. But those passing yards have come very differently. Matt Stafford, 6 passing touchdowns to only 1 interception so far in these playoffs. He's being very careful with the football, and he's completing 72% of his passes. Joe Burrow, 4 touchdowns. He's thrown an extra interception with 2, only completing 68.8% of his passes. The numbers say, got to give the edge to Stafford in the quarterbacking so far. In terms of the receiving core and the options for these quarterbacks, I think I have to give it a push. Look, Cooper Kupp is nuclear. So is Jamar Chase. Odell Beckham is a great number 2. So is T. Higgins. I might argue that the Bengals offer a little more balance and a little more depth, especially with the way they use Joe Mixon in the receiving game. Look, he's caught 13 balls in 3 games for over 100 yards. So the way they use Joe Mixon as a receiver is significant. He gets about 5 targets a game. So he is a significant piece of their pass offense. And I don't necessarily think the Rams have that in their backfield, or certainly not to that extent. So I might give the Bengals an edge on the balance, but overall, I'm going to give this a push. Like, I think both of these teams have very talented receiving options. Cooper Kupp is obviously statistically the best receiver in this game, but boy, Kupp versus Chase, who has the edge there? That's going to be very fun to watch. And it is due in no small part to that Joe Mixon involvement in the pass game that I have to give a slim advantage at the running back position to the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Mixon is leading these playoffs in rush yards, obviously has had a ton of volume. Cam Akers number 3, which is spectacular coming off of the injury that he had. However, Joe Mixon averaging 3.7 yards per carry and has found the end zone on the ground so far in these playoffs. Cam Akers has had a lot of volume, but he's only averaging 2.8 yards per carry and has not found the end zone on the ground in 3 games. You add in the fact that Mixon's got 15 targets, 13 catches, 106 yards receiving. You got to give the edge here to the Bengals at the running back position. Cincinnati and Joe Mixon get the edge. The Bengals also have the edge, and I consider it a strong one in terms of special teams. Look, Chris Evans has been fantastic in these playoffs returning kicks. 200 plus kick return yards for Chris Evans. The Rams do not have anybody close to measurable in those terms. Kicking the football, Evan McPherson obviously has been a massive story for the Bengals. 16 of 16 on his kicks overall. That includes making 12 field goals in 3 games for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's got a long of 54, has hit 3 kicks from 50 plus. McPherson's been on fire, and you look at Matt Gay, he's missed 2 kicks in these playoffs. He only has a long of 46. He has an attempt from more than 50. He missed that kick. So you have to give the edge there to Evan McPherson. If there is a slight edge to be found, it may come in the punting game. We know that obviously Hecker is an elite punter, but neither one of these punters have allowed much in the return game. Both of these teams have had excellent coverage on kick and punt returns. I got to give a strong edge here to Cincinnati. I just think their special teams has played better in these playoffs. On the offensive line, this is a strong lean to the Los Angeles Rams. You can't allow your quarterback to get sacked 12 times in 3 games and expect anybody to look at your offensive line and go, oh, that's kind of comparable. It's just not the case. Now, this is a little injury dependent because, look, if Andrew Whitworth can't play for some reason, that obviously fundamentally changes that Rams offensive line. But if we assume he plays, the Rams have only allowed Stafford to get sacked 5 times in 3 games. Again, Burrow's got sacked 12 times. There's no comparison between these 2 offensive lines. Now, in terms of the pass rush, I do have to give a slim edge here to the Bengals. We talked about it before. They've registered 8 quarterback sacks so far in these playoffs. The Rams have only registered 5 quarterback sacks, and both of these teams have more than 10 tackles for loss in these playoffs. Both of these teams are getting into the backfield, but the Bengals have more consistently gotten to the quarterback. So I do have to give a slim edge here in the pass rush to Cincinnati. And we talked about the run defense, how both of these teams were like top 6 run defenses in the regular season, yet hasn't been that way in the playoffs. This is a strong edge to the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams only allowing 54 yards per game on the ground to a combination of James Conner, Leonard Fournette, Eli Mitchell, who had himself a great season, and there's that 49ers team that's built to run the football. Rams are still only allowing 54 yards per game on average on the ground. I would say if you get to 60, you've had yourself a good game. You take a look at the Bengals, they've given up 127.3 yards per game on the ground. That's to a combination of Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry returning from injury, and Jerick McKinnon. And you just don't expect that, you're going to give up that kind of run to especially Jerick McKinnon. No disrespect to Jerick McKinnon, but when you look at Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry, one of these names is not like the other, and it's Jerick McKinnon. Now, the Chiefs used him very well, but the Bengals are just not getting the results there in that run defense that they were used to having in the regular season. This is a strong edge coming into Super Bowl 56 for Los Angeles. Now, a lot's been made about the pass defense and the secondary and how, oh my God, the Rams secondary, they've got such an edge in this game. I'm actually going to give this a push, and here's why. It's true that the Rams have only allowed 220.7 yards per game against through the air to a combination of Kyler Murray, Tom Brady, and Jimmy Garoppolo. And it is also true that the Bengals have allowed more, 243.7 yards per game to a combination of Derek Carr, Ryan Tannehill, and Patrick Mahomes. But let's really dig into that. Kyler Murray was not the same quarterback in the second half of the season. Obviously, they started red hot. And everybody had the memes. D-Hop down there somewhere. But after Hopkins got hurt, Kyler Murray was not the same quarterback in the back half of the season. Yes, Tom Brady. Obviously, Tom Brady. But then Jimmy Garoppolo. They gave up 230 some yards passing and 2 touchdowns to Jimmy Garoppolo. That's like an above average game for Jimmy Garoppolo this year. Yeah, he ended the season kind of hot, but in the playoffs, he was doing nothing. And you look at 243.7, Derek Carr is an underrated thrower of the football. Ryan Tannehill is an underrated thrower of the football. And Patrick Mahomes, who if he would have averaged what he's been averaging in the playoffs all season, would have pushed 6,000 yards passing. So quite frankly, I understand what people are saying. I'm going to have to give this one a push. And we have to look at the intangibles. Obviously, I have been so high this year on the swagger and the confidence of Joe Burrow and what he has brought to that Bengals team, to the roster, to the fan base. From the top down, everybody feels more confident in the Cincinnati Bengals. The scars of the past and all the pain of the past with this team, it's like it didn't exist. Like Joe Burrow wasn't around for any of that. All Joe Burrow was doing was winning championships at LSU. Joe Burrow doesn't care about any of that stuff, and it has cascaded down to the rest of the team, because the rest of the team, when you're in your heads and you think, oh my God, we're snake bitten, we can never win, Joe Burrow has completely changed that, and it's entirely in his persona, in his confidence, the swagger that he brings. I've made a ton of that, but you cannot deny the storyline of Matt Stafford languishing in Detroit for over a decade. He comes to the Rams, willy-nilly he's playing in a Super Bowl. Obviously, the Rams playing the Super Bowl at home, you can't measure that. You can't accurately determine how much of an advantage is that really. We saw it was a big advantage for Tampa Bay last year. They got the job done. The Rams obviously want to follow suit. I have to give a slim edge here to the Rams because I can't deny those two massive intangible storylines coming in, as much respect as I have to give to what Joe Burrow has done with this Bengals team. So across those categories, it's 4-3 for the Rams with 2 pushes in terms of who's got the edge. But here's where all of that fades away. Here's nut cutting time. Who's going to win Super Bowl 56? By a final score of 24-23 on a game-winning field goal by Evan McPherson, the Cincinnati Bengals will win Super Bowl 56. When you look at this quarterback matchup of Matt Stafford and Joe Burrow, obviously the stats tell you Stafford has been better in these playoffs. But in terms of this game, Matt Stafford and Joe Burrow have the exact same level of experience. Neither one of these players has any context about this game whatsoever, because Matt Stafford was nowhere close to sniffing this game up until he came to Los Angeles. So yes, for as much better that Stafford's been playing in these playoffs, this game is its own animal. And both of those quarterbacks are going to be finding that out in real time this week. Meanwhile, just 3 years ago, Joe Burrow's winning a national championship with LSU. You can look at the national championship game almost on the same level as the Super Bowl, certainly for collegiate athletes. Obviously, the Super Bowl is its own, like I just said, it's its own monster. But recency bias has to play in there a little bit. Joe Burrow won a massive football game much more recently than Matt Stafford did. Yes, this is the 3rd straight road game for Cincinnati. And yes, this is 2 of the 5 least penalized teams in the NFL this year. It's almost like somebody's been talking about that all season, and maybe it was important. And all of the areas where the Rams have an advantage in this game, I'm not discounting or taking away any of them. I think Joe Burrow gets this job done. 24-23 is my final score for the Cincinnati Bengals. So obviously against the spread, I'm taking Cincinnati plus the 4.5 points. And I believe if you look at the last 10 Super Bowls, there's history on my side in terms of taking the points with any favorite more than a field goal. Like I'm trying to remember the last time a favorite of 3 points or more actually covered against the spread in the Super Bowl. These tend to be either close games or underdog blowouts. Favorites do not cover big lines in the Super Bowl in general. So I got to take the 4.5 with Cincinnati. I think either way you go with this game, I think you got to take the 4.5. Total with 48.5, got to lean under on it. Like we said, 6-14 situationally this season. Rams at home, Bengals away from home. I think under is the play there. And my Super Bowl 56 MVP, Cincinnati Bengals running back Joe Mixon. I've got Joe Mixon touching the ball at least 25 times in this game. I've got him hitting at least 120 total yards, and I've got him finding the end zone twice, once on the ground and once through the air. Joe Mixon is my Super Bowl 56 MVP, and the Cincinnati Bengals are my champions of Super Bowl 56. There you have it, folks. There is my pick for Super Bowl 56, and it is time now for the final time this season to give you the patented comment of the week. The comment of the week from the AFC and NFC Championship round goes to the Blind Canadian Cat. The final comment of the week goes to the Blind Canadian Cat. Some of the absolute best insight that I've had in my comment section all year long has come from the Blind Canadian Cat, and they had a mecca of a comment here. Really good on one side, the other side not so much, but let's just go ahead and explore it. The Blind Canadian Cat says, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a row, but you gotta wonder how much San Fran's season sweep over LA hangs on their head. Anything can happen when you play a divisional rival, though, especially with this being the Rams' 8th game against their own division. It's going to be brutal, and Vegas knows exactly what it's doing, putting that hook on that spread. -3, we may pinch our noses and take. At -3.5 against a team that swept them, man, does no one feel comfortable with that hook. Not at all. You got to think San Fran's playing with house money, though, so there's more pressure on LA to get this win. We'll see how that bodes. A lot of interesting insight there. All I'm going to say for the AFC game is until someone can beat Kansas City, I'm going to have a hard time believing anyone will, and that was fair. KC has half-assed the regular season for the second straight year in my eyes, and once the playoffs start, no one can compete with them. And I want to root for Burrow, not the Bengals, however, but he's not better than Josh Allen, nor is Cincy better than Buffalo. My hopes ain't exactly high that Cincinnati could make this a game, maybe early, but KC rolls at some point. God, who do I root for in the AFC as a stubborn Ravens fan who likes parity? My hands are tied. Good luck on the picks, Justin. And look, I can't blame anybody for assuming Kansas City until proven otherwise. Again, it's just that feeling. It's just that gut feeling. And it's a bad explanation. Gut feeling is a bad explanation, but it's there and you can't explain it sometimes. But boy, when it pays off, it's a very satisfying feeling. And that's exactly what I had. I had a gut feeling. It wound up paying off. But the Blind Canadian Cat, yours is the final comment of the week for the 2021 season. And yes, somehow I did manage to talk this long only about a single game. But when it's the last game of the year, boy, you're going to get your money's worth in this episode. Listen, folks, we do this every year. We close it off. It's a sad feeling every year. It's never fun to end the season. But we're going to end the season on an incredible game that no one saw coming. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun with it. I'm certainly going to enjoy myself, and I'm sure you will too. And thank you. Thank you so much. Even if this is the first time you've ever listened to an episode of mine, or if you've been here for years and years, maybe you're somebody that's been here, you might be an OG. You might have been here from the beginning when I started this back in like 2011. So if that's the case, man, you're a real one. Thank you so much. If it's not the case, welcome aboard. I hope you stick around throughout the off season, and I hope we see you again next year. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees. Welcome to Super Bowl 56. Let's have some fun. Thank you.